Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. The jihadi terrorist turned president, Ahmad a-Shara, came to New York this week for his maiden speech at the UN General Assembly, as well as meetings with world leaders and diplomats. During his less than 10 months tenure since his forces supposedly overthrew the Assad regime, a-Shara has tried to present a new, moderate Syria which has included security talks with Israel. Regarding the latter, Prime Minister Netanyahu insisted that Israel's priorities are the demilitarization of South-Western Syria, which borders the Golan Heights, and the protection of the Druze community in the Suwayda Governorate. This is a crucial yet insufficient part of the effort to stabilize Syria in the context of domestic and regional forces which are pulling in different directions. Can these efforts succeed? Joining us for the discussion include Professor Russell Berman, formerly a senior advisor at the U.S. State Department's Policy Planning Staff, currently the director of the Middle East and Islamic World Working Group at Hoover Institution at Stanford University. It's good to see you, Russell.
Good to see you, Jonathan.
It's a pleasure having you as usual. Also joining our discussion today is retired Colonel Abbas Dahouk, who formerly served as a military advisor at the U.S. State Department, as well as an army attaché to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Currently, he is a board member at the Arab American Council. It's good to see you, Colonel.
Good to see you too. Thank you.
And I'd like to start with you, Professor Berman, when we're looking at the visit for the first time of a Syrian president in a couple of decades now, visiting the United Nations and holding high-level talks throughout New York City. His top diplomat also visited Washington. They met with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and his team to deliberate various aspects, which also included the possible removal altogether of the so-called Caesar Act, and many other discussions that took place in New York City, during the course of which we did hear the president or this interim government, supposedly, again, highlight that he, on the one hand, seeks to establish a security arrangement with Israel, but on the other hand, pushing back on any possibility of joining the Abraham Accords.
Well, it's a complicated puzzle right now in a larger region full of other complicated puzzles. What al-Shara has to do really fundamentally is to gain credibility as a post-terrorist political leader. He has to prove to the Syrians, including all the minorities in Syria, that he is no longer the terrorist, and he has to prove that to the West, in particular to the United States. His credibility moving forward depends on that. There's a lot of hope that the optimistic vision that he projects is indeed valid, but the proof is in the pudding, and it's going to depend on how he puts together his government, the various committees, etc. Terrible things have happened in Syria since he was in charge, to the Alawites on the coast, to the Druze in the south, and we have to determine who is responsible and whether he was implicated or whether he can get the rogue elements under control that carried this out. That's the real bottom line. Now, if he can clear that, if indeed he is the no longer terrorist president or interim president of Syria, well, then he has a challenge with Israel. There are a lot of elements in that file. Reducing the fighting at the convincing Israel to stop the attacks, which Israel is carrying out because of its interests in demilitarizing Southwest Syria. Also, Israel's interest in the cross-border Druze politics. But al-Shara also has to think through where he is with regard to Turkey. Turkey also has very ambitious interests coming from the north. In a probably worst case scenario, you could end up with a de facto Korea in Syria, a Turkish zone, an Israeli zone. Um, that's something he has to worry about as well. So he has a lot on his plate, and in the meantime, he has to um, convince his American interlocutors that he's someone to be trusted.
Indeed. Well, trust, I think, will be a hard sell. Of course, there are always the political figures who do not necessarily consider everything and understand the inner workings and ulterior motives of such actors. But nonetheless, Colonel Dahouk, when we're looking at the complexities at hand, I'm very keen on hearing your take on it. Since, on the one hand, as Professor Berman has mentioned, the Israeli concerns with regard to southern Syria are one angle, to include, of course, the protection of the Druze and Christians in Suwayda Governorate, in particular, which is still besieged by the Damascus-backed forces and interim government, or rather the interior forces, as they call them, as we speak, with dire humanitarian conditions, all the while Turkey holding a far larger territory under occupation of its own forces, and making sure that its national security interests are taken into account vis-a-vis also the Kurdish aspect that is, despite reaching various agreements, not overly keen on reaching a new practical arrangement of integration into the new government due to its various atrocities committed and no will or a sign of will to provide any type of guarantees to ensure that it won't perpetrate those against the Kurds as well.
Well, you just very clearly identified a very complex problem. I mean, this is, and I agree with Dr. Berman that the proof is in the pudding. I mean, here's you have a current government of Syria that was have a lot at stakes. I mean, it has the trust of United States, at least at this point, and European countries, the Arab world, to behave as a government, but does not have any tools to do so. So Syria has been a tough country to control or to work with, especially with from the U.S. Perspective, from the European perspective, Turkey, and also Israel. So is this government is capable of putting all this myriad of problems in one basket and put them together around a table to for a better future for Syria. We have to wait and see. Seems now al-Shara government expecting the United States to release all these sanctions, or to lift up all these sanctions quickly so they can move forward with their programs. But at the same time, you see different on the grounds in Syria. He's asking the Syrian people to give him a chance, to give him a 5 year to put a government together and to come up with some kind of constitution, people's assembly, and so on. So you see, I see a disconnect. The way he's approaching his rhetoric on the outside Syria, and also including Israel, where he's willing to sit down on the table and discuss security with them, is one thing. But then when you see on the ground, like you mentioned, in the Suwayda region, so far still under blockade. Very few humanitarian assistance is moving in. You still have about 35 or so villages uninhabited, and people are internally displaced. They need to go back home. And there's no government institution whatsoever, and basic things like water, electricity is not happening. And you don't see the government doing much about it. And so it is a complex problem. If we expect al-Shara to do the right thing, I think it's not going to happen. And especially after those also recent atrocities, not only on the with the Alawites, with the Christians, and especially now with the Druze, and that's a special problem for Shara, different than the Kurds and different than the Christians or the Alawites. That cross border with the Druze of Israel, that's something different. Those Druze are very well connected in Israel and very well connected with the Druze of Syria through blood and kin. So it's not just an Israeli issue. It's actually a Druze has a different a cross-border connection than the Kurds or any other entity. So that has to be taken into consideration as well.
Indeed. Well, with all this host of challenges that this Damascus government has to face, and much due to its own doing, uh, let's bring another challenge into the equation. The Islamic Republic of Iran is not rolling over, according to both intelligence reports as well as public OSINT or open source information. There are indications that the Iranians are operating quite vigorously to rehabilitate their proxy in Lebanon, utilizing Syria for the transfer of munitions and other type of illicit material, be it funds or other things, while also seeking to destabilize Syria proper. Professor Berman, I'd like to hear your take on that.
Well, that's definitely not good news. I mean, we're hoping that Iran was, um, if not conclusively dealt with, at least knocked out. But if it's trying to rehabilitate Hezbollah in Iran, excuse me, in Lebanon via the routes through Syria, it's going to be putting itself really at odds with everyone, surely with the al-Shara government. Now we hope that the al-Shara government will be a modern secular government, but it's not in its DNA, and in that sense, it's going to be at odds with the Shia imperialism of Iran. That's one thing. It's also in competition with Turkey. They're not on the same page at all, and of course Israel. So Iran is fighting an uphill battle that I will confess, hope it loses. But it's going to be a further problem for al-Shara. I think the conundrum that al-Shara faces is this. Um, he has to establish credibility in a program for Syria through some forceful engagement on multiple levels within Syria. At the same time, the United States hasn't lifted the sanctions, and it's not only up to the White House, it's also up to Congress with regard to Caesar Act. Um, Israel is very suspicious as well. Turkey is occupying part of Syria. Uh, the al-Shara government just doesn't have the muscle to deal with all of this, even if it had the will. As I've said before, I hope it has the will. I'm prepared to cut it some slack on that, but it has to prove that. It's a question, and it doesn't have the capacity to prove it. And I'm not sure how he could solve this.
Well, we'll dive into that momentarily. I'd like to hear first, Colonel, the Hoax point of view, also on the Iranian angle within this host of complexities voiced.
Well, Iran is still trying to survive, or the Iranian regime still try to survive through their own proxies. And Israel, from the Hezbollah of Lebanon, from the Iranian perspective, still alive. There's still, I think, there's still a utility and use for Iran, and they will use it to their advantage. I mean, they still have also Hamas somewhat is providing some resistance in the region, and the Houthis in the Arabian Peninsula, somewhat Iraq too. So all these tentacles are still useful for Iran's survival and will not stop from helping them. I mean, you still also see that the smuggling that comes through Syria to Lebanon is still ongoing. I mean, you see that. About a month ago or so, there was a shipment of anti-tank weapons coming from that the Syrian government was able to stop that. This is it's not a new capability to have, but that tells you about the way they're thinking, the future fight. So that perhaps Hezbollah thinks that we at Hezbollah might have to use some anti-tank weapons in the south versus using those long-range precision missiles. So the fight continues from an Iranian perspective, while at the same time trying on the diplomatic level to come up with some kind of diplomatic solution for their nuclear program. And if you listen to the president today, obviously still looks at Iran as the number one terrorist supporting state, and they will not have any kind of nuclear program themselves. So Iran will not stop. They will continue to play a role to obviously to their advantage, not to protect the sovereignty and integrity of greater the Syrian government.
Well, there is a disconnect here between the political pledges that the Trump administration made to the American people on wanting to disengage and withdraw from Syria to reality on the ground. Let's face it, we're talking here about years upon years in which Iranian elements were entrenching in Syria, have created a vast network of smuggling routes and other methods to ensure the proper deployment or transfer of munitions and other sophisticated weaponry and cash from Iran through Iraq, through Syria, into Lebanon. And right now, one of the main routes that are being discussed in various circles is Al-Tanf, where we still have a very small contingent of forces of the United States. I think it's one of the last. But in the event that this is withdrawn, the Iranians are already waiting to see when that happens, and they will immediately engage in utilizing those cross-border activities the moment the United States withdraws all forces, something that raises questions as to whether or not the Trump administration can be pragmatic enough to confront the challenges at hand at a time when we do know that despite the many flaws this regime has in Damascus, Iran happens to be its enemy, and it will fight it. It will not fight ISIS, in contrast to what everybody says. I think they will seek to integrate the Islamic State into its own ranks. But when it comes to the Iranians, they will try to mount some type of opposition. Whether or not they have the forces of that, if they stop massacring their own people, I'm pretty sure they'll be able to allocate some forces to that end. Professor Berman?
Well, listen, you began by saying that the Trump administration promised the American public it wouldn't engage in Syria. In fact, in the first administration, the president wanted to withdraw, and that was slow walked and stopped. But if indeed the Trump administration does somehow or other engage militarily in Syria or elsewhere, I'm sorry to let you know, Jonathan, that he won't be the first president for whom there's a discrepancy between campaign promises and real politics. Listen, he wants to reduce American engagement militarily around the world. He also wants to bring an end to the Iranian threat. He's going to come up with face the fact that he's at some point force is going to be necessary, as we've already seen with the nuclear attacks on the Iranian nuclear sites. I don't expect Al-Tanf to be terminated. I do expect, though, that in the in a campaign to end Iranian expansion through Syria, new technologies are going to play a bigger role. Maybe we don't really need boots on the ground if we have drones in the air that can detect trucks carrying whatever, whether it's anti-tank weaponry or whether it's Captagon. I mean, Captagon is for the Middle East what fentanyl is for the United States, and I think that's also something that could be stopped. Um, Undermining the what, narco-terrorist aspect of some of these elements through coordinated deployment of drones.
Absolutely. Well, Hezbollah is known for its narco activity, not only in the Middle East, but also in South America and elsewhere. It's been a menace to many nations where their populations have been harmed quite heftily, to say it mildly, by these illicit materials. Colonel Dahouk, your take on that?
Well, I agree on the use of drones. I mean, this is something the DoD did after we left Afghanistan. If you remember, we had they said we have the over-the-horizon capability, where while the U.S. troops not present inside Afghanistan, but the capability was still there to go inside, fly inside anywhere in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and surgically hit targets of opportunity. If the government of Lebanon was able to regain sovereignty of its country, perhaps there could be a place where the United States can have this capability to over the horizon fly something and selectively take some targets inside Syria. But the problem of boots on the grounds, just like Dr. Berman mentioned during the first administration, Trump wants all troops out. But the problem at that time, I was part of the State Department at that period, and the problem was there was no plan B. If you take all the troops out of Syria, the State Department was not ready to surge diplomatically or do something else in conjunction with regional countries or so on. And now we're facing the same thing. According, you heard our envoy, Barak to Syria, and that he said we have no plan B. I mean, the only plan they have is a-Shara to be in charge. And at this point, the U.S. government, at least Department of War, is not ready to relinquish the counter ISIS campaign or kind of ISIS fight to the a-Shara government. That's not going to happen anytime soon. So you'll have to keep some kind of presence in the north and also at Tanf. So it's a very fluid situation, obviously in Syria, and while the president wants to disengage, I think Syria is a place where it's very, very hard to just engage abruptly military like we did in Afghanistan.
Indeed. Well, Operation Inherent Resolve is vital, and the Islamic State, despite efforts now by the Damascus regime in collaboration with Turkey to take members of the Islamic State from the Al-Hol camp in Al-Hasaka and reintegrate them into society, specifically in Idlib. Other than that, it is quite concerning to many people with regard to the circumstances in which such a camp could, at any given moment, be broken into chaos, with roughly 14,000 fighters and 61,000 altogether members of the Islamic State in those camps in Kurdish-held regions, which are, of course, still backed by the United States, even though there are question marks as to the degree of collaboration at this point between CENTCOM and the SDF alliance. We're drawing near to the end of the program. In 1 minute and 20 seconds to each of you, what should we focus on moving forward when it comes to Syria? Professor Berman, we'll start with you.
a-Shara has a lot on his plate. I wish him well. Syria lived through decades of terrible Assad dictatorship. No one should be sorry that it's gone, but the Syrian people deserve a stable and prosperous economy and state. Al-Shara has to prove that he is indeed post-terrorist, and he has to be able to focus on balancing the various challenges to his authority externally, Israel, Turkey, Iran, but also be sure to gain credibility with the minorities, which at this point just is not present.
Thank you, Professor Berman. Colonel Dahouk, your take?
I agree. I think besides the regional and the international dimension, domestically, as also he needs to look at all the minorities, like we mentioned. He is looked at as the savior of Syria, as the leader of the new Syria. He's also the single point of failure. I think he does not have a deep bench for any contingency. And the time is not on his side. He needs to break that ice between his government and the minority groups, whether it's the Kurds, the Druze, the Alawites, and Christians, and bring them on perhaps a round table and discuss the future of Syria together.
What about an international commission of inquiry into the various atrocities committed in the Suwayda Governorate, murdering, of course, more than 2,000 people, predominantly Druze, but also many Christians amongst them? Are we expected to see something, or due to international aspirations to really see this Damascus regime succeed, we're going to see the whitewashing of those crimes?
I mean, I don't think this regime is able to investigate itself. I mean, it doesn't have the structure for it, and I don't think the Druze, at least, or the Alawites will accept that. So there has to be some kind of transparent, independent, and perhaps an international committee to look at this. And bring people to justice. But that should not stop al-Shara from doing responsibilities of a head of state and to restructure his government to take over and to a place where the Syrian people deserve.
Well, time will tell whether or not this government or interim government will sustain. We will discuss this more in the future. I'd like to immediately thank Professor Berman and Colonel Dahouk for all of your insights. I'd like also to thank all of you at home. Until our next edition, from here in Jerusalem, Shalom.
For more of TV7 Israel's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.